Welcome back in episode 3 of the Cougar Digest podcast. I am Rob Sellers, the publisher of Cougar Digest, joined again, as always, by the digital dude, Kevin.
Hey,
Kevin,
Rob.
how you doing this week, brother?
Doing all right, man. Still hurting from last Saturday, but what can you do? You have to move forward and prepare for this next game because you just have to put it in the background and just keep moving forward. But we'll talk about that shortly.
Yeah, no, I get it. Absolutely. Obviously, we've been on the board this week. We've seen what the temperature's been like on the board, I guess is the best way to put it.
Pretty hot. Yeah, pretty hot.
It's been rough, and I get it. Absolutely. I mean, tough loss to Rice for the second game of the season. You struggled a bit, obviously, to put UTSA away. I want to give credit to those programs like that are able to build a lot better through the transfer portal.
They came in ready.
And it's going to bring some evenness across the landscape, but it's not going to be that again. That's not one of those like, well, they're a better team. They are a better team. Rice is a good team. They've got good, veteran leadership in some spots, but at the end of the day, that's not one of those you're going to explain away and just say it's okay. So tough loss, obviously. I know you were there. I tapped out this week. I had a back issue going on, so I was trying to get it good, and I kind of felt like if I went down there, it was going to end up lingering. So, fortunately or unfortunately, I wasn't there in person. I was able to watch the game on NFL Network. But Kevin, I know we were texting some early on in the game, and you were concerned, obviously, in the first half, like anybody would be in your spot, about even having anything to put anything together whatsoever. And so, what were your thoughts as you were down there watching it unfold live?
The best way that I can put it is through the first 15 minutes of the game, I was in complete shock. Like whenever I was going back and rewatching the game, I would see me on the camera and I was just like this. I was just throwing my hands up. I was like this, just I was in the end zone, and I was just like, what's going on? Like what, like literally what is going on? Why can't we catch a football? Why can't we get a first down? Why can't we stop them on 3rd and long? I mean, I just had so many things going through my head. Right? Like what changed from UTSA where we had, a dominant defense against a really good team, a team that could win their conference, to going to Rice, which, they may not be on the same level as UTSA, but they have good players also, like you mentioned.
Right.
But
we should expect them not to get better, but
yeah, exactly. But we still have the players and we have the talent that you would think would be able to cover, a win on that game and not get behind so far. So the first 15 minutes, I was just in disbelief. And then the next 15 minutes, I was just angry. So I was going through all these different emotions.
Fan watching their team get upset. We should do a good thread on that, or maybe even a whole podcast on that. The stages of, the emotional roller coaster that is watching that.
Have like a thermometer.
Different levels. You see stuff like that go crazy out of the gate. And I don't know. As I'm watching it, I'm making notes and all that. I'm looking back over here at my notes as I write. I find I do a better job, especially this is the whole argument between being on the sideline, being in the box. But if I have an opportunity to watch it, or at least if I'm down the sideline, go back and watch it, and I make notes as I go. It's more of how I feel in the moment, and I can go back and look at it and see, But anyway, I would say I start putting notes together right off the bat. And I note that they ran some tempo in the first series, although I went back and watched it today. We were discussing on the board.
Yeah.
They did go tempo a couple times on the first series, or once on the first series, maybe once or twice on the second series. But the way things played out, the way with the drops and with the interception, technically that goes in the stat book as the Donovan Smith interception, his first of the season. But, that's just one of those, that nose guard, or whoever that was, I believe it was a nose guard, just made such an amazing play and was able to get there and knock his. He was obviously trying to throw that out of bounds. It's not something like he made a bad decision and threw into coverage and got an interception. So many counts, obviously, you can't afford them. It still penalized the team, obviously, and put them in a bad spot, gave them a short field, which Rice took advantage of. But
they didn't.
I start looking at notes that, and it's stuff that we talk about on the board and stuff. There was a point, at some point, I remember like in the third quarter or something, they came out, they showed some tempo, they got to 3rd and short, they ran up the middle on 3rd and short, which has been a big bugaboo, I guess, if you would, that people complain about on the board because of how ineffective it's been. But they did it and went and got it. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm literally, as I'm writing stuff down, you think, okay, tough situation. You spotted them 2 touchdowns, but that's not the end of the world. We got a ton of football left. Okay,
Yeah.
well, you spotted them 3 touchdowns now. Well, Christian McCaffrey, sorry, not Christian McCaffrey, the other McCaffrey, his brother, makes. I mean, the catch that he made as his helmet was getting pulled off or whatever.
The one-handed catch in the end zone. Yeah.
Who can do that, and who could do it again 2 times in a row? Probably not even him. I'm just saying. Again, I say all this not to explain away. I know people think I explain and make excuses all the time, but I've said it to people before. It's the weirdest. This team has the weirdest snake bit team at times that just not only will get a turnover or a penalty, but they will find a way to do it at the worst possible time to inflict the most injury to themselves. So
For sure. Yeah.
again, like I've said on the board this week, it boils all back down to culture. And at the end of the day, culture is going to fall at the feet of one person. So if your team's not ready, I understand and I respect the fact that you noticed that they overlooked them and you couldn't get them motivated. That I can respect that. But over time, as those type of situations keep happening, I think it causes you problems in terms of it just comes back to be a culture question.
And
why can't your teams enter the game ready to play or whatever? Maybe it's gut check time for some people on there.
I think it is. And but you bring up an interesting, question about culture.
Yeah.
What is the culture of this team?
Yeah.
Like what do they take after? What do they look for? How do you define this team? I mean,
right.
Who can answer that question?
And that's a great question because as I was filling out me and Jeremy Clark, by the way, I forgot to mention that in the open. Our TCU insider from Horned Frog Blitz, he's going to be on here in a bit. We're going to talk to him as well, and he'll have some more insight. But as I was answering some questions, we were exchanging some content this week, kind of our behind the enemy lines deal. One of his questions was kind of basically like about the culture, what's the strengths and weaknesses on each side of the ball. And when I go to think about, obviously they've got strengths in this and that. I identify the offensive line as a weakness because it is depth and talent level at times in some spots. I think it's a problem, but wide receivers are deep and talented. But when I flip to the defensive side, I'm thinking, what's this strength of the defense? It hasn't. I mean, they've got talent up front and a deep defensive line, but they've not been able to put pressure yet. Okay, and that's been a major problem, and it caused a lot of problems in the Rice game. JT Daniels is going to have some games where he picks teams apart, and he's going to have some games where teams put pressure on him and make him uncomfortable, and he's not going to have an effective day. Houston just didn't get there all the time, whether it be close but no cigar, getting there and slipping. They just – obviously Nelson Caesar got him his second of the season. Second game in a row he got one. It was a great sack, just like the first one where he overpowered the defender. But you know what I mean? It's not going to cut it. You got to be able to get in there and make the quarterback uncomfortable, or they're just going to keep seeing the same thing. You can only ask your defensive back to stick with a wide receiver for so long before they're simply reacting to what the wide receiver's doing, and that wide receiver's got that advantage. And God forbid you get somebody like Tank Dell that just simply accelerates faster than any other human out of a cut, and that's how they create separation. All of a sudden, JT Daniels, with all the arm strength in the world back there, and he's a good quarterback when given some time, he just sits back there and picks them apart.
I think he was, when he was coming out of high school, wasn't he like the number one?
Yeah, he was like the top in the class from yeah, exactly.
And you give him 4 or 5 seconds,
clearly.
And you're going to get picked apart. You have to, and we have to get somebody else involved instead of Caesar. He can't be the only guy doing sacks.
Exactly. I think I put that today. You'll see that obviously in the piece later in the week. But I said Nelson Caesar's kind of done his part the first 2 games. I'd like to see him even pick up a multiple sack game along the way. I'm sure he will, but it's got to be somebody else too. Who else is going to step up? And I don't care if it comes from the inside or the outside. To be quite honest, it doesn't matter. You just have to have, as a defensive line as a whole, you got to be able to get better pressure. And if that means you got to bring 5 instead of 4, and that that messes up your back end numbers, I know that all plays hand in hand. But this way didn't work last week. Let's just put it that way. You know what I'm saying? That you can't just keep that. By the way, I'm hearing the thunder out the window. I know we're recording; people won't see this till later. But man, I'll tell you what, that's a good thing to hear at the moment. We hadn't had rain around here forever, as everybody knows.
I think it rained last week, and I did not see any of it at all.
Yeah.
When I was watching it come down, it completely missed my side of town. And
Yeah, it
I was
did. Matter of
like,
fact,
oh,
when I was heading up to the
well,
school, it was raining, and I saw it. We got a couple sprinkles on the windshield and got all excited about it, and then we didn't get anything. So, but yeah, evidently, according to the expert weather people in the city, I've seen the last couple of days, we're supposed to get some here in the next couple of days. Everybody's going to get a little bit. So,
as long as it's not
thank goodness
110
for that.
degrees
I'm
out.
glad this heat's broken down a bit. Finally, we broke off the triple digits, and I was talking to someone on the phone today and talking about how the high on Saturday is supposed to be like 90 or 91, and after a cold front with minimal humidity. So, man, I feel like I'm in heaven over there on
It's going to be
Saturday.
refreshing. Yeah, it's going to be refreshing to be on the sideline when it's only 90 instead of
Yeah.
108.
I think you and me could both handle that. I know, speaking for myself, that first day kicked my butt because
Yeah.
a little bit too excited for the first game. Got out there early, and I probably stood in the sun down there for at least 2 or 3 hours before the game ever really got going. And by that, how that works. I believe you
Well, you
saw
were
me
out
on
in
the
the sun.
sideline.
You were out in the sun the night before also.
Oh,
So
that's true. We did go a
you,
game the night before.
yeah, you double dipped. So you have an
So no
excuse.
games this week. It's big bye week in Houston, by the way. Not a lot of high school games going on. I kind of kicked around the idea of going down. Angleton plays at Foster, and obviously Petway is one of the commitments for the Cougars at Angleton, and
Yeah.
Dot's little brother plays for Foster. So I was kind of going to go down there. I decided to wait because I already know where I'm going to go next week as well. So next week I'll be down at Shadow Creek's playing Pearland, so that's a big one.
Oh yeah.
And that'll be. I know I've already seen Shadow Creek once, but I understand that's may even have some coaches on site that night for some in-person evaluations or whatnot. So we'll see how that all plays out between now and then.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, Rob, because I mean, one of the things that obviously is what you do is recruiting news, right?
Right.
So, I mean, on the recruiting front, I mean, they're obviously we're at a standstill at this point right now. I mean,
Right.
I'm not seeing any movement from anybody really anywhere. We saw it mostly during the summer with all the camps and everything else.
Right.
But when do you think we might start to see some more movement, in the future? Like, when does that usually happen around?
That's true. I know they have a couple official visitors coming in this week. I don't have it nailed down just exactly who yet, but we're
Okay.
getting to that point now. We're going to have official visitors come in. There could be folks that come in on a visit that have not seen, not even been here before, and they get here and get a good experience type thing. That's obviously anybody in on official visits on commitment watch. So
Right.
obviously those guys, there's a couple guys they wanted to evaluate a little bit more early in the season. Maybe get a little bit better feel for in the first couple games. So as they start getting film back on those guys that they were waiting to see,
Yeah.
I think you'll see them either willing to take a commitment from a couple guys, or now, you know what I mean, that may have been ready to
Yeah.
commit before and just they wanted to wait and dot the I's and cross the T's, so to speak.
Sure.
Or also guys that they may get to based on other people's commitments or new tape or something like that this year, that they may could push and offer a guy they haven't offered yet, and that guy might be hoping and waiting, or maybe like I said before, they might get to a point where they'll take a commitment from a guy they were trying to hold off on before,
Right.
because they had someone else a little higher on the board. Maybe they were hoping, and now that looks different.
Sure.
There's things that it is slow, and absolutely you're right. Now is kind of the dead period. It's always that way. But I think there's little things still moving around back there. I think they're going to have a great guest list for TCU again. They had a really good guest list. We talked about it, and I put up some names on the site. But I think again they'll have a really good guest list, and then looking ahead even a little bit further, it's a good week this week to get some guys on campus. But I had someone tell me, bring to my attention in October when Houston hosts Texas.
Yeah,
I'm sure everyone's anxious for that one.
Can't
but
wait.
when they host Texas, let's not talk that far ahead. They will.
No.
They will be the only home game by a Texas school in Texas that weekend, the way the schedule works out. So basically, any hot recruit that wants to go see a home game that week in Texas will have Houston as basically the only option.
Wow.
The way the oddity of the schedule, like, Texas is out of town, obviously they're here, but someone else is at Kansas State, and someone else is at Iowa State. So however it works out, obviously that couldn't have been intentional, but they picked up on that. So basically they'll probably be able to be kind of choosy on who they let come to that game against Texas. It's going to be a wild atmosphere. We won't even get to the game part of it just yet because that's too far out.
Too far ahead.
atmosphere-wise, it should be a great atmosphere to have a ton of good recruits on hand. And so, we'll see how it plays out between now and then and how it plays out on the field. But again, they'll have it served up like they did for UTSA to have great eyeballs watching them, and it's up to them to do the best with it and make the most out of it. So we'll see how that goes between now and then. But you bring up a good point. That is a good point about recruiting.
Yeah, and it's something that I was curious about because you kind of figure like a lot of the recruits are going to commit before this. A lot of them are saying I want to commit before the season, make a decision right, and then they want to play out their senior year, as they usually do. But there's a lot of guys who don't, and they wait. When is that first signing period?
The early period, I'll look it up, but it's going to be in December at some point. Usually right around mid-December.
Okay,
15th to 20th, somewhere right in there.
Okay.
That's obviously become the bigger of the two. It's basically everybody that's committed. You urge them strongly to go ahead and sign early, and hope to get everybody out of the way just so you can be done with that part of it. And then you they reevaluate then and see what's left, what spots are left to fill. Maybe send some new offers out to try to get those last few spots like that locked down before February. And then in today's world, of course, we're waiting for transfer portal stuff, and so they're always saving some spots for that. So it's crazy. I think, again, I've said many times, it's a good thing the way things have changed as of late. I think it's great for the players. It gives them a lot more power, gives them some money.
Yeah.
But it's been a constant change the last few years of just trying to and it's affected the traditional way that things have been done. But that doesn't mean that that's always the worst way.
Right. Yeah, it seems to be like almost split up now with the early signing period, and then it almost seems like they want to get all of their class as much as they can as far as high schoolers signing the early signing period, and then continue to work on those portals afterwards.
And and that's true. And the power as far as being in the players' hands, these guys are coming in. I talked to some parents and stuff. These guys come in these days out of high school, and they're pretty much already an associate's degree. So
yeah.
So the fact that they can come in and in 2 years be a 4-year degree graduate, maybe even sooner, it just makes that portal that much more important because, I know the rules are a little bit different for grad transfer, obviously, but they have that ability now. There's still a lot of eligibility left to play football somewhere else.
Yeah.
And they've got their degree already. So, I mean, it's hard to blame them if they look. And, it works both ways. Houston gets guys from other schools the same way, and those fans are disappointed just the same. But, again, that's another show, another day. We can rant about all the good and bad of how the current format is with all that.
Yeah, it's just, I think a lot of people are still a little confused about it, and it's going to ongoing process, and it's going to probably change again after this year. You just never know what kind of new rules or, procedures are going to be put in place, for the transfer portal. And I think everybody is still probably thinking there needs to be some sort of control whenever it comes to contacting these kids. And, you look at some of them are signing, deals that they're not even sure what they're signing. I think
you see that in the news this week, right? Yeah, in the news, the guy that took the loan out.
And there's people out there who, right or wrong, maybe it's good to have the money now, and then maybe you don't even make it to the NFL, so it's not a loss, right?
Right.
I mean, you never know, but it's just another one of those things you have to think about. If there's someone out there who wants to take advantage of somebody in this situation, they're going to do it, and players have to be smart and just make sure.
Anytime that level of money is involved, you're going to have nefarious people around that are looking to get their hands on that. So sometimes it comes from within your own family, and sometimes it's outside people. But nonetheless, it's good. I like in the current age how much they teach these kids about that, and you have the NFL rookie symposium, whatever that they have every year. They bring people in just simply to educate these guys a little bit more about money. And some guys take the advice, some guys don't, but at least offer them that education so that if they do it anyway, that's their business.
Yeah. I remember stories about it was Vince Young spending $5,000 at Cheesecake Factory. It was just, how do you spend $5,000 at Cheesecake? I mean,
Cheesecake Factory's got some good cheesecake.
I don't doubt that, but $5,000.
Not $5,000 good. All right, so we're set tonight. I mean, look, we touched on Rice. I mean, I don't mean to just left turn there, but we touched on Rice. I don't know. There's not a lot you can say about it. It was a horrible performance. It can't happen. Unexcusable, all those other terms you want to use, but I'm happy that the college football world goes week to week, and now it's time to turn the page, at least we'll have a new thing to like or dislike about it this Saturday, and it'll guide the conversation where it may be on the website. So yeah, I think we're good to get Jeremy in here in a bit, and then I don't know. After that, we'll just turn the page, I guess, right?
Yep. Let's talk to Jeremy. Let's get his thoughts, and then we'll give our final thoughts on what we think is going to happen or needs to happen this Saturday.
You go. Sounds good.
All right.
Welcome back in, Cougar Digest Podcast. We are joined now by Jeremy Clark from Horned Frog Blitz, our TCU corner of the 247 Sports Network. He's the publisher and obviously the guy that we would go to for the insider information on our TCU game this week. Jeremy, welcome in, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
Definitely. Jeremy and his team do a great job over there. I look at their stuff a lot. Obviously, as Houston's been getting ready to move to the Big 12. I've kind of looked and seen what some of the other, Big 12 programs do and how they try to expand their coverage and stuff like that. But you guys make sure and go check out the site this week. Obviously, that's where you need to be to get some of their end of this anyway. But y'all give him a follow on Twitter or whatever and check his stuff out. I know they do a great job up there. So, Jeremy, obviously just jumping into things, basically Houston hosting TCU down here. This is their first Big 12 game. I guess one thing that's been on my mind this week is were you around, Jeremy? Were you covering TCU when they made their jump to the Big 12?
Yeah, I actually was. It was back in 2012.
So this is semi-familiar, obviously different circumstances and all that. But do you remember what it was like making that jump and hoping for them to catch up on the recruiting front?
Yeah, I remember it very vividly. I mean, the Horned Frogs were in the Big East Conference for about 30 minutes. If you guys remember that, but
I do remember that fondly.
Yeah. So at the time you had, Chris Del Conte was the athletic director at TCU, and he was really big in getting the Frogs into the Big 12. And we all know that whoever watches sports, we all know it's based off football. So obviously you had some really good runs with TCU football around that time. They had just played in the Rose Bowl a couple years before that, but Chris Del Conte was big in that. He obviously knew DeLoss Dodds and built that relationship with him even further. And I think having Texas behind TCU joining the Big 12 was huge for them. And we all sat there and thought, how's TCU going to be once they joined the quote unquote big boys? They were used to playing in the Conference USA, the WAC, and then the Mountain West, and they always had success in those, the G5 conferences, we call them now.
Right.
They were called mid-majors back in the day.
Whatever they are this week, right?
Yeah. So they had the mid-major term, so everyone was kind of waiting to see how they would do in a tougher conference. And they've played pretty well. They've had some down years, but they've had some really good years too. So yeah, I mean that transition, I think it's really cool that TCU gets to play Houston for their first Big 12 game.
Yeah, one of those side story type things that's involved in that people
absolutely
for different conversation pieces. Well, did it take them? Obviously, I didn't follow TCU as closely as you did back then, but I obviously remember the transition and all that. Did it take them a little while? Like I found that Houston obviously has gotten pretty quick traction on the recruiting front with skill guys. Those guys are usually guys anyway that they were going to, skill guys are easier to get. But offensive lineman is going to be – did it take them a while before they start landing some bigger, higher-ranked offensive line recruits?
Yeah, I think when you look back at their classes, I think 2016 is probably the year that they really started to set themselves apart from the way they recruited before. They've always done a really good job of finding these hidden gems. Gary was really good about finding these guys that might have been different positions in high school and moving them around at TCU and making them into – all-conference players or even all-Americans, guys like Jerry Hughes and guys that, the list goes on. But I think 2016 was really the first year that they went out, landed a bunch of these four-star kids. They were able to land some bigger name at offensive line. And but I think a lot of that was kind of based off how they performed in 2014. They were right there in the thick of the playoff race. Everyone still goes back and looks at that Baylor game that they lost in Waco, that 61-58 game. But people, the TCU fans and myself included, just covering the team, I really feel like that 2014 team was still the best one I've seen
Yeah.
in recent memory. But yeah, I think it took them a couple years once they got into the Big 12, but they've recruited at a high level ever since. I think they had 5 consecutive recruiting cycles where they were finishing right behind Texas and Oklahoma, third overall in the Big 12, and they've kind of continued to keep that pace a little bit.
If Houston's looking for a roadmap, man, I think that's obviously somewhere they should look, obviously, with the similarities, but also it goes hand in hand. You can get recruits, but you also got to have performance and results on the field in order for that to go hand in hand. So anyway, let's get more to the subject task at hand this week. TCU coming down from the outside looking in. We obviously, pretty much everybody in the country watched y'all's opening game, obviously. Tough loss for them, but, I mean, it was a heck of a ball game, and I think just as much as people were enamored with what Colorado was doing, I mean, myself, I was impressed. I knew TCU had lost a lot from last year and was interested to see what they were going to look like out of the gate. And, I mean, I felt like it got blown. It almost felt like as if TCU was blown out in that game because of the coverage of it when they really weren't. It was a good game. It really was. Obviously, you guys had Nicholls State last week, so that probably didn't offer you a ton other than maybe give you a little bit better look at some of the guys with a little bit less pressure on. But where do you sit as Houston comes up on the schedule this week? What do you think about the team as a whole? What's their identity so far?
That's a good question. I really don't think we'll know the identity until these next 2 weeks when they play Houston and when they got SMU at home. But you're right. I mean, the Colorado game opened a lot of eyes. I really don't think anyone in the nation really expected that. It was obviously a big-time shocker, but what we've learned in week 2 of college football is, hey, Colorado might be real. I mean,
exactly. It's not going to end up looking like a bad loss in the end, maybe.
Absolutely. And what I've told a lot of people, for TCU to have to prepare for that game, they had to watch 500 feet of film. Nebraska had to watch 10 feet. They had to watch so many different college games with all those different transfers, all the different coaches coming from different areas. And it was really hard for them to prepare. And as bad as they played, they still only lost by 3. They had 2 red zone turnovers. They missed a field goal. They actually had 541 yards of offense, which was 130 more yards than they had the previous year when they played Colorado. And they scored more points. So, I mean, offensively, they obviously did enough to get the win. Defensively, it was not the defense I expected to see. You had the core players returning on that side of the ball. You had 7 returning starters, and they missed assignments. They missed tackles. They were getting play calls in late. And I think Shedeur Sanders, it was his coming out party. And I think we've all seen not only is Colorado good, but Shedeur Sanders is a really good quarterback. And Travis Hunter, quite arguably, could be the best player in college football right now that we've seen. But I think last week against Nicholls, what I wanted to see out of that defense was improved tackling. They did improve tackling. They didn't have 20-plus missed tackles. They still have a little bit of a problem getting to the quarterback. They only had 3 sacks. Their quarterback had a little bit of time rolling out of the pocket a little bit. They didn't give up a huge pass play, but they were still giving up some long third down conversions. Third down conversions is something that's kind of concerning to me. And flipping over to offense, as good as they ran the ball against Colorado, they were just as bad against Nicholls. They couldn't get any running lanes. They had 160 yards, I believe, total on the ground, and 60 of that was from Chandler Morris. So you took a major step back running the football. Now, I will say Chandler Morris's decision-making as a quarterback was way improved than what he saw against Colorado. He threw the ball extremely well. 26 of 30, I think he went, and 2 of those incompletions were drops. So he could have easily been 28 of 30 on the day. But I think overall, just looking at the scope of work from what they did from Colorado to Nicholls on offense, I think Chandler played much better, made better decisions. He wasn't throwing crazy against Colorado. He was throwing all over the place. And we saw some younger guys step up. That's what you want to see in these kind of games. You want to see them get out to a big lead. And I told a lot of people on my podcast and on my side that I get it. Some people want to see these FCS games. They want to see a 60-7 type win. They want to see 60 on offense and no touchdowns on defense. And that didn't happen. So everyone's kind of dialing back. Is TCU really a good team? We don't know that, but I will say this. Those kind of games are also games where you can experiment with a lot of different things. Like Chandler Morris's helmet pops off on the 4-yard line against Houston. They probably wouldn't let Josh Hoover come in there. They would take the time out and let Chandler Morris come back out there. And lo and behold, Josh Hoover stays out there and he takes a snap and he fumbles his very first college snap. So it's this year. So
but those are the games. It's great that you say that this week because that's exactly what Houston was hoping to do against Rice is to, get out to a lead and be able to get some of these young guys in that are going to need that experience along the way or like you said, answer some questions and stuff. And it just did not play out that way. And I even wrote something about it early in the week, just about them. Not only did they lose the game, but they lost a big opportunity for some of these specifically on the offensive line. They've got guys, every backup, I don't believe, has taken a snap for the Houston Cougars. So they're either young, waiting to get their first chance, or transfers from the offseason. So those are those guys, the backups. Like you got to work to try to get those guys in those easy games. You got to handle your business in those easier games so that you have that opportunity. So I think it's great you bring that up. It just kind of feeds into the situation that's going on at the moment. So I think I'm with you in terms of not knowing the identity of any team too at this point early on. Kevin, I know we talked a little bit about what this team's identity is before we got Jeremy on here for Houston, but it's still like Jeremy said with TCU, it's a work in progress because I feel like they played good defense against UTSA and they played a good half against Rice, but they happened to make it the second half after they spotted them 4 touchdowns and they couldn't close it out. So who's going to show up this week, right?
That's right. I kind of have a question for you, Jeremy. You just talking about entering in when TCU entered into the Big 12. Their first couple of years they didn't do so. 4-5, I think the first year. I think they went 2 games. Their second year, we know what our chat board looks like. Already after just 2 games in the Big 12. Was the honeymoon over after 4-5 or 2-7? What did you have the same kind of agitated subscriber? I mean, what was?
Do you have calm fans on your board, Jeremy?
Yeah, were they going crazy? And believe, I love our guys on Cougar Digest, but they do love to go from 0 to 150, on an interception or a fumble or anything like that, right? Like get rid of them, So I mean, and Patterson, I mean, I think he was a great coach. I really do. I think he was a good recruiter also,
Yeah.
And his time ran out. But what was the thoughts in those first 2 seasons with
were they
TCU
patient?
and their fans? Yeah. Were they patient or were they what's going on? Why aren't we being competitive?
Well, I think fan bases, every fan base is kind of the same way. There's you're hating the team or you're loving the team. And I think those, from what I remember, the first 2 years, I think the Frog fans were pretty patient. I give them a lot of credit for that. They had a young quarterback. They had Casey Paul and everyone remembers he was arrested. So they had to start a guy named Trevon. Yeah, they had to start a guy named Trevon Boykin one year. And so he's a young guy. And so they were going through some growing pains there. But it's kind of weird. You could start to see that 2013 team, they lost a lot of games, but every game they lost was by 1 score. Yeah. It was really weird. It's like you can legitimately say they could have been 9-3 that year if they would have just fixed a couple things. So whereas 2014 might have surprised the rest of the nation, it really didn't surprise a lot of TCU fans because they all knew how close they were in 2013 in a lot of those games. And they returned a ton of that experience. They returned Boykin. They returned Josh Doxson. They had some good running backs. They had a great offensive line, and they had a good defense. And Patterson was coaching at a high level, like you said, Kevin. And it was just I'll say that every fan base wants to win. And when you go 4-5 and 2-7, you start to hear from the other fan bases, told you guys TCU was not going to be good. They should have stayed mid-major. Big 12 was going to – and then when 2014 rolled around, they started to gain a little bit more respect, and then 2015, of course. But I think it's just a process. It's just a process of how long and how patient fans can be. And I'll give TCU fans credit. They were very patient during that time where they were transitioning into the Big 12.
Yeah, I think the third year they only lost 1 game. So I mean they were patient. They did what they had to do. They were recruiting, as a Big 12 team, and they finally started to put it together and were able to compete. And that's always something that we think about here is depth and how we're going to recruit and all that. And I'm trying to be patient, like everybody else. And I think I'm better at it than a lot of other people. But it's something that I just it's just curious, especially since we're kind of doing the same thing that TCU did a decade ago, we're in that same boat now. So it's just, perspective, I guess, it's just trying to get a perspective on what things were like back then as opposed to now, and the money's bigger now, right? I mean, you got NIL and you got the transfer portal and
it's a whole different game these days.
It's a whole different game, TCU did it the right way. And, I'm hoping that we can do it the right way also,
I think it's exact same way TCU was, because Houston's had some success and they've got a great university. They're in a great city that's a recruiting hotbed. It's one of the most recruited regions in all of America. So they've got the right tools, and that's kind of what TCU was selling to these recruits. Like, hey, why go play at a Baylor or a Texas? Stay at home. We're trying to build a fence around DFW, and that's what Gary Patterson. He really wanted to do that. Now, did they do that? I don't think so. They did land some kids that were, local kids, but I think Sonny Dykes and those guys have done a much better job of keeping most of that local talent home. And it may take a few cycles for Houston to really do that, but I mean, they won a great recruiting battle against TCU getting Matthew Golden. I love that kid.
I thought about that. Yeah, I thought about that this week as well with him.
That was a huge loss for them. They wanted that kid
there.
bad. Yeah, they wanted that kid bad, and especially after he kind of blew up at the Texas State 7-on-7 tournament, and every TCU fan felt like he's going to be a guy that's going to come in early, and you talk to people around the program, he's going to play early, and he goes to Houston and looks like he's getting on the field plenty and making some catches.
That was
TCU
probably
gets lots of our guys, so
because of Brian Carrington and Samples as well. They were there, right? They were involved. They were the ones that were involved with Matthew.
Yeah,
I didn't think they were going to be able to pull him away from, because obviously I know Brian Carrington from being down here at Houston, and Samples was down here. He never played, but he was down here. But yeah, knowing those guys and how good a job they did at SMU before they switched over, even in talking to Matthew down the stretch, I didn't know they were going to be able to pull him away. Just those guys did a really good job, and I'm sure they weren't thrilled to lose them or whatever. I don't remember the circumstances of how they left or whatever, but now they're over together, paired up at Arizona State, doing their thing and stealing kids out of Texas. So, yeah, that was a win that I give definitely credit for them doing, because I didn't think that there was a point they were going to pull them away from him.
Yeah, a lot of it had to do with Doug Meacham. He's the inside receivers coach. He's the one that
Former U of H coach.
Yeah, there you go. Coordinator.
These names are killing me tonight, man. I'm hearing all these names.
So part of that 2014 resurgent for TCU was bringing in a guy, Doug Meacham and Sonny Cumbie, that they were co-offensive coordinators in 2014.
Yeah.
So, but Doug did a really good job of recruiting Matthew, and of course, when TCU and Gary Patterson decided to part ways, that kind of opened his recruitment up a little bit. But TCU did get back in it, and Doug had a really good relationship. They felt pretty good about getting him back in the fold. And I mean, I'll be honest, I thought he was gonna
I did too.
Horn Frog, and he kind of proved all of us wrong and decided to be a Cougar. But that was huge for Houston.
Well, they'll get their chance to see him in person, obviously Saturday. That'll probably be you always think about the backstories, and I'm sure now that we get into Big 12 play, there's going to be a ton of players on both sides and coaches that's something I always do right before the game. I always kind of pick up the roster and look at guys that maybe I want to say hi to that I know from the other side type thing, because you haven't seen. But man, some of these names you spit out just throw me for a loop. I mean, some of those names you don't hear for a while. They move on to different things, and you keep track of them. But you know how it goes, man. You always try to keep those relationships around and all that. But man, there's a ton of overlap between TCU and Houston, obviously, with the coaching staffs. They know each other well, and I don't think there's any strangeness between the two in terms of not knowing what the other one's going to try to do. I think everybody at least is familiar with each other enough that nothing's going to really surprise this week. But it's just going to come down to who executes, who gets it done. And I know I sent my questions back today for the thing that'll come back later, the behind-the-scenes deal, behind enemy lines piece that we do, just in terms of how I thought the thing was going to play out, how I thought the game would play out. I was telling Kevin, I think Houston will play to their competition this week. I think it'll be a close game. I still think TCU pulls away in the fourth to win it, but I at least expect I would hope that it's a competitive game and entertaining.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a competitive game because, like I said earlier, I really don't know what TCU's identity is. It was kind of a weird feeling for me after that Colorado loss because there was a lot of chances that TCU had to win that game. And
Yeah.
I know a lot of people were kind of writing off the season, but then again, when I see Colorado play the next week against Nebraska and the way they handled Nebraska only had to watch one game tape.
Exactly. That was a great point earlier.
Yeah.
In
So
terms of preparing for a team that switched 80 players out and new coaching, I mean, that's
very
I get it. I didn't think of that before, but that probably brought up a unique set of challenges.
And so when they go to play Nickel State, you have one game film to watch from them, and lo and behold, a defense that gives up. Now, granted, I understand there's a huge talent.
Just a slight, but yeah.
I mean, so Houston's going to be a little bit more athletic than Nichols. I'll say that. And they're not as Nichols wasn't as talented as Colorado, but Sonny Dykes said it perfect earlier this week during his press conferences, or even after the game. He said, "Hey, no matter who you're playing, it's tough to keep a team out of the end zone." And 1 week after TCU gives up 45, they give up 2 field goals. So that's huge to me. And when I went back and watched that Colorado game, there was little bitty mistakes that if they could just tackle here, or they could tackle there, they took a right angle here. Those long plays Dylan Edwards had against them don't happen. And you got to start to question, hey, do they hold them to less points? And in my mind, I think they do. But I mean, it's going to be a dogfight. I mean, they're going to have to – TCU's going to have to be able to run the football. That's what Kendall Browse wants to do. There's another name for you, Houston guy.
Goodness, as you said it, I thought, oh, no.
So, Kendall wants to run the football. He wants to use the run to set up the pass. I think if Chandler can continue to climb and improve, especially throwing the football the way he did last week, I think that's going to be a good sign for TCU. They've got to get consistent running the football, though. I'm going to keep saying it. Everyone knows these games are won and lost in the trenches. Right. And last week against Nichols, they didn't create run lanes. I will say one positive about the offensive line. They're only one of 7 teams right now in college football that haven't given up a sack. So they're doing a great job of protecting Chandler. Now, on the flip side, I think collectively they only have 3 sacks from their defensive linemen. So they've got it. Donovan Smith, the way he's able to run the football. The one good thing I would say is in this game, they've seen Donovan Smith before. Exactly. He played, at Texas Tech last year, and TCU got to see a lot of him last year. And I thought he was a pretty good quarterback. He's a big guy. He can run, and he'll be the most athletic quarterback that they faced. Now, how much he runs is going to be the question mark, but it's going to be a dogfight. I'm right there with you. I'm not going to buy into TCU going down and beating Houston, especially in a night game, by any 14, 20 points. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be kind of a nail biter right there till the end, fourth quarter, and we're gonna see if TCU still has some of that magic they were able to get last year, winning those games in the end.
That's true. Yeah. They were known for that, and that's again we talked earlier before you came on about culture and all that, and so.
Don't talk to us about nail biters. We had a lot of them last year also. It felt like the first half of our season was overtime games. We took all these games down to the final, drive, the final minute, and I'm getting kind of tired of that, to be honest. I'd rather get a little separation, in the scores on, for us. And I'm like you guys, I'm expecting a competitive game this Saturday also. I think that's what everybody wants to see is we just want to see some good competition on the field.
Yeah,
I'm excited. It's the first time I get to come to Houston to watch a game.
Oh, that's right, man. That's another cool thing. A lot of these guys, I know a lot of people in the business, been in this business for a while. Jeremy, I know we've crossed paths a couple times, but not as much as some other people along the way, just because TCU and Houston haven't crossed paths as much. But it's been fun. We got to catch up with JJ up at the press box, JJ Perez from the UTSA site the first week. And so, I enjoyed that part of it, getting to see some guys. I'm looking forward to getting to see some guys I haven't seen on a regular basis before Houston got into the Big 12. So, I don't know, man. I think it's going to be fun. Hopefully you'll have fun down here. You coming down early? You just coming down in time for the game or what?
Son's got a game Friday night, so coming down Saturday. We're making that drive down Saturday. We'll stay Saturday night. I'm not dumb enough to drive to Houston, watch a game, write about it, and then try to drive back to Fort Worth. I'm not 20 years old anymore.
I'm already dreading that Texas Tech game in a few weeks. At the end of the month, Houston plays at Tech, so I know how that goes. That's a long one, but yeah, I'm with you. I'm getting to the age where I don't do that as much anymore, just because, like you said, I'm not 22 anymore. I'm not the guy that powers through, can drive 24 hours straight and be fine with it. But
I'm still
hey,
don't
man,
have to
look,
do it.
yeah, exactly. I appreciate Jeremy, man. I really appreciate you coming on, man. Just to share a little bit more about the other side of this. That's what we hope to do with this podcast. So, just give as much information as possible. I appreciate you jumping on, and good luck. I'll make sure we'll swing by early. Come say hi to you up in the press box, whatever. Me and Kevin usually down on the sideline for the games with photos and video, but we'll make sure to come stop by and say hi.
And how can people find you, Jeremy?
Oh, definitely. Thanks, Jay. Yeah, what you got, Kevin, as far as other than Horn Frog Blitz, where else would you like to tell people to come find you at?
Oh, sorry. I totally missed you guys on that.
No, you're good.
Yeah, you can find me at hornfrogblitz.com. You can follow me on Twitter at jclarkhfb247 if you want to learn a little bit about the TCU Horned Frogs this week.
Yeah, for sure. I encourage everybody to do that for sure. That's always use the network. If you're a subscriber, for sure, man, the network will get you a lot of info on the other team. So, again, man, thanks a ton for coming in. Episode 3 in the books, I would say now. We're going to talk a little bit more probably about me and Kevin's way that we feel like it plays out. But thanks again, man. Appreciate you jumping on.
Thank you,
Appreciate it, Jeremy. It was fun.
Thank you, boys.
All right. Well, that was a great discussion that we had with Jeremy Clark there with the Horned Frogs site for 24/7. Gave us a lot of good insight and came in with a lot of good information, especially about the transition that TCU had into the Big 12.
Yeah.
Something to be mindful of.
Right. I'm not trying to say be happy with where things are, but it's a process. But it's good to hear it from that end too, because there's a lot of similarities.
Exactly, a lot of similarities. So let's talk about what we think needs to happen this Saturday in order for Houston to come away with a win. So what do you think needs to happen?
I'm going to say it's going to come back down again like I did the first week of the season. Whether or not, I don't know how successful it was looking back, but it's going to come back to pressure on the quarterback. Houston's got to keep the pressure off of Donovan Smith a little bit. They got to do a better job of giving him a little bit of time to operate back there, and vice versa on the other side of the line. They're going to have to create pressure to make Chandler Morris uncomfortable back there.
Yeah.
Nelson Caesar's done a great job the first couple games. He got him one each game, but he's going to have to continue that and maybe even step it up a bit where he can, but also someone else has got to be able to come in there and join the mix. I don't care if it's outside, inside. They've got a lot of guys that rotate and all that, but someone else is going to have to help get pressure. And I'm not even talking about sacks. It's just got to make him uncomfortable back there because, as we saw with JT Daniels, we just sat back there and picked him apart, and that's what you're going to get every time. If you give a college-level quarterback enough time, they're going to pick you apart back there. So, for me, it's pressure on the quarterback on both sides.
I agree with that, and I don't think it's one thing that needs to go right.
Yeah.
There's obviously multiple things that need to go right for this team in order for us to get a win. Whether it happens, that's another question. I think one, and I think you mentioned it on the chat board, execution.
Yeah,
you got to execute. They came out and they weren't executing at the beginning of the game last week against Rice, and they weren't able to execute on defense either.
Yeah,
and it just seemed like it just took a while for them to make those adjustments. But if they come out and as you mentioned on the board, getting a fast start is about executing. You got to catch those balls when they hit you in the chest, right? You got to be able to open up some running lanes for these running backs. You got to mix in some QB runs with Donovan Smith. I mean, like I said, there's not one thing that they need to do. They just need to do whatever they weren't able to do last week better this week, because the competition is stepped up now. We're playing. Yes, they didn't have a great national championship game, but they were still in a national championship game, and as we know, we've talked about how difficult it is just to win a conference, and they got all the way to, being able to compete for a championship. So, I mean, you still have players on this team that were in that game last year. So it's about execution. You got to limit the mistakes, and you got to ball control and just and try to get some turnovers. But like what you said, that comes with pressure in the quarterback and pressure in the quarterback into making bad decisions. again, like you said, if you just let them sit back
A
there,
lot of
5,
it's hand
6
in hand.
seconds,
It really is.
yeah. So execute, stick to your game plan, and just, you got to play better than TCU. You just got to play smarter. What else can you say? Just execute.
I agree. All right, man.
Yeah.
Well, I believe that's going to be it for us. Episode 3. Man, it's rolling along now. I'm excited. We got more stuff coming. We'll announce it on the board. We got some stuff on the plans for maybe this weekend after the game. I won't tip the hat more than that, or whatever. Tip my hand so that in case it doesn't come through, we look like fools. But I appreciate it again, man. Thanks a lot to Kevin for helping, getting involved with this and helping me get it rolling. And episode 3's in the books. 4 will be up next year pretty quick, man.
Yep. We'll see everybody this Saturday at the game. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. Go ahead and please like and subscribe down below. Give us your feedback in the chat. We'd like to hear from you. We want to know what your thoughts are on the game this upcoming week, about what we're doing, what we're talking about. Do you agree with us? Do you not agree with us? Any feedback and all feedback is good. Again, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and as always, follow us on Cougar Digest for the latest University of Houston recruiting and athletics news. See you at the game side.